Hey, what's up, y'all? Was just checking to make sure that this was broadcasting. I'm still trying to figure out restream, restream people. If y'all are watching this, please hook a brother up, help a brother out. I'm trying to get this thing to work. But if I can get it to work, it's going to be really awesome. Anyway, it is time once again for quantum spirituality. And I want to start off the new year with this particular broadcast by kind of level setting because one of the things that I'm doing, and this is my evolution, this is my journey. I'm just sharing it with you. I happen to be clever enough to be able to put it into words and to put it into a public forum. But I'm at the point where I'm really done with theology. I'm really done with religion. And the catch is that when I go back and I look through the history of my life, I see where religion never really worked for me, where theology never really worked for me. It was an interesting diversion, and I'm not going to say that it was totally useless because I did learn a lot. And mostly what I learned is about me. And I also learned about God and how creation manifests itself in us. So I'm hoping that everybody's able to see this. I hope that everybody's able to hear this because I'm going to go ahead and light the candle as if we were. And hopefully it all works out. But for those of you who are watching on Facebook, please share this video. If anything that I've said in the past that it's resonated with you, or what I say currently that it resonates with you, if it has blessed you in any way, share that blessing with others. Because I'm not just doing videos to do videos. I'm doing videos because I really, really deep down in my heart want to change the world. And if you're watching it on YouTube, please click the subscribe button and click the little bell so that you get notifications whenever I go live and whenever I post a new video. All of this is very important. It's a little bit of housekeeping, but want to make sure that we get all of this out as far and wide as possible. And so I said that I'm really done with theology. And I mean that. Man, I mean that shit from the bottom of my heart. It's funny to me how people go on and argue and debate about God. And meanwhile, people around them are hungry. People around them are homeless. People around them are destitute. People around them are oppressed. And so we're debating God, this nebulous thing. And meanwhile, we're completely oblivious to situations and circumstances around us. Now, to be fair, the same thing could be said about science. Because see, my wife gave me a gut check on Sunday. Because I sit up and I watch these documentaries about science and I'm really curious about how science and spirituality dovetail. This is a real thing for me. And she asked me, she said, is this putting any food on our table? Is this doing anything for humanity? And she's absolutely right. The thing about science, though, is that enough discussion around it leads to more experimentation, which leads to more innovation, which leads to improvement in life. Now, she would argue that point with me, and her argument is perfectly valid. I don't debate that. And again, I could be wrong. I always am open to that possibility. I don't know it all. I'm a smart guy. I know a lot, but I don't know everything, not by a long shot. So, with all of that being said, I want to level set and really talk about this whole theology thing and basically, all that we've been taught. Now, here's the thing. Some of you who are watching this may be Hindu, maybe Muslim, maybe Buddhist, maybe Wicca, maybe a humanist, maybe an atheist. But a lot of you are Christians because that's where I came from. And my connection to many of you is through Christianity. So when I say things, I'm not explicitly bashing Christianity. It just seems that way because Christianity is my point of reference. That's my spiritual backyard, if you will. So I want to talk about things like the Bible, for example. This is real. I remember when I was in ministry, I was a preacher, I was a pastor, I was a bishop, apostle, blah blah blah, and it meant a lot for me to understand these things and to be able to articulate them. And a lot of this was because I really believed that I saw something that maybe someone else didn't see, and that because of what I saw would help me and that it might help others. And I still believe that, but I was trying to do this from the springboard of Christianity. And what I've come to realize is that honestly, if you look at the timeline of history, Christianity has probably done more to harm Western culture than anything else. Now, some people say, well, if it weren't for religion, there wouldn't be science and all of this other stuff. And yeah, you can make the case for that. I don't. And this is my show, so I'm not going to. Now, if you want to debate that, well, find somebody else to debate it with, because I'm not going to debate it. I'm going to say what I say and do what I do. I'm going to run in my lane. And if you dig it, that's great. Hang on, because the ride is going to be really interesting. It's going to be really cool. On the other hand, if you don't dig it, well, you can post your comment and I'll say, hey, I duly note your disagreement. But then I'll likely disregard it and keep moving. Especially if it points to something where I've already been. Because one of the things that I want to make clear about myself is that I have no intention of learning backward. I have no intention of learning something that I already passed through. For example, if I were an auto mechanic and I'm working on 21st century cars, I have no need to understand the inner workings of a Model T Ford. There's no point. Now, it may be nice to know. It might be nice to understand. It might be nice to have the experience to say that I've actually worked on an original Ford four-cylinder engine and all of that. It might be good, but it serves no purpose today. And that's where I'm getting at with quantum spirituality, is that there has to be some practical application to it. And here's the thing. You can't get all highbrow and big brain science-y in the same way that you would do in trying to get all theologically deep, because basically what happens then is you get the same result. At the end of the day, what you need are practical, real things that you can apply in your day-to-day life, that you can use, that you can share, that you can explain at some reasonable level. So one of the things that I don't want to do, like I talk about a lot of sciencey things. I talk about particles and I talk about fields and I talk about the standard model and all of these other things. But again, if you don't understand how it works, it doesn't really matter. Now, let's talk about this. For example, we talk about particles and waves. A particle is a thing. It's a manifestation it's a something that that can be measured, that it can be observed, and that it is something that occupies a finite amount of space, right? A wave, on the other hand, is also measurable, it's also observable, and it also occupies a volume of space. But a wave is more like an oscillation, whereas a particle is a point, if you want to make it simple. And so, humanity, we people, are both particles and waves. We are particles in that you're looking at me on this camera. Now, if you were sitting across from me, I'd be able to observe you likewise. And I'd be able to say, well, that's my friend, that's my brother, that's my sister, it's my cousin, whomever. And and that would be observing the particulate nature of the human. Now, we are also spirit. And spirit operates different than physicality because you can walk into a room, and if your spirit is vibrating at a higher frequency than others in the room, or if it's vibrating significantly lower than the average frequency in the room, that is something that will be detectable. Can it be measured? Probably not. But it can definitely be detected, and that because listen, I've had this happen to me where I've walked into a room and somebody said, "Hey, when you walked in, the whole atmosphere changed." Now, I used to always say, "Well, that's the Christ in me," but it's not. Well, yes and no, because the Christ in me is the Christ in you, and this Christ is in every human being. Um, it's the anointing, if you will. It is the it's the spiritual reckoning. Okay, the spiritual value, and I don't mean like some are valued higher than others. Is that the different frequencies are values. So when you walk into a room and the atmosphere changes, whereas it was somber and now it's a little more upbeat, where it was quiet and now it's a little bit more gregarious, where it was upbeat and now it's suddenly sadder. These are all examples of the wave nature of humanity. In other words, we talk about the field of the human heart. The human heart gives off an electromagnetic field that is roughly 6 feet in diameter. So basically, 6 feet around you in any direction that your heart can be detected. And this is how we're able to say, when you're talking to someone, you say, "Hey, I feel your heart on this." It's not just something abstract, it's actually concrete. It's something empirical because this is something that is actually recognizable. This field also, basically, our brain has a field. And people whose brain field is really tuned or really acute, these are the people that have basically things what you would call extrasensory, like extrasensory perception or telekinesis or telepathy. Those are things that when that part of the brain is vibrating at such a high frequency, it's able to detect things that are imperceptible to normal humanity. So that kind of explains the wave and the particle nature of humanity. Now, here's the thing, a particle appears in a field when something excites the field. Now, to use something a little naughty, when we talk about sex usually it's designed to produce pleasure, that's excitement, and the result of that excitement can be procreation. So something excites the field and produces a particle. You with me so far? The interesting thing about that, though, is that the excitement also produces emotions. And the emotions are basically the result of chemical reactions in the body. So when these chemical reactions happen, now this excitement produces a wave which results in a particle. And as we grow and expand in our understanding and expand in our physicality, and then when we go to have sex like our parents did, we too produce excitement in the field, which then produces a wave, which often results in a particle. And lather, rinse, repeat. And now you know how humanity gets here. Now, moment. Sorry about that, folks. But anyway, back to it. Stars, suns, planets, comets, all of this stuff began to appear because something was excited that caused an eminence from a singularity, which began to produce stuff. It began to produce tangible, real material. Okay? So, when we talk about quantum reality, it's like basically the smallest particles begin to aggregate and collate or coalesce and begin to produce meaningful things. So we from this we get light, we get heat, we get matter, we get antimatter, we get all of these different things. Now, you'll say, okay, so Derek, why does this matter? Pun intended. I'm glad you asked. Because what happens then is that we begin to have something that we can quantify, and anything that we can quantify, we begin to understand. See, here's the thing. Religion teaches you that God is this nebulous thing that cannot be comprehended and cannot be understood. And that's fine if you want to operate in ignorance. But, and this is an interesting thing, when I look at my kids and my sons and I look at them and I see how they develop and how their logic and thought patterns are beginning to come together, and I'm really excited because I can look at some of these kids and say, you know something, this guy actually may be smarter than I am. He may have figured things out in ways that I couldn't. Now, people will say, well, that's kind of blasphemous, or that's kind of heretical, Derek, that you can't know more than God. Or can you? See, that's the thing. We don't really know. But I would bet that if there is a creator God in him or her that as he or she looks at us, would probably like to see us achieve, grow, learn, and understand. Would love to, I think that source would actually be tickled pink or some other fancy color in the universe that we don't know of, but tickled that we know, that we learn. And then, you know, at some point in humanity's future, that maybe we figure out how universes are created or how the multiverse is created and how we can jump from universe to universe, from dimension to dimension, that we can go to the point of the singularity. of all things and then to the farthest expanses of it. But you can't get to these things without understanding. And to say that you will never understand it, in my mind, is an intellectual cop out. And again, that's what religion does. Religion tells people to take the intellectual L. Just take the L. You don't need to know that. There are some things that you don't need to know. Now, granted, we're not going to know everything. I always say that there are two things that I know that they exist, but I really don't need to know how. And that are embalming and dry cleaning. They work. Somehow it happens. Somehow it provides a benefit to society, but I don't know how it works, and I really don't need to know. That's me. Your mileage may vary. But there are other things that I do want to understand. I do like to understand how light works, because understanding how light works, and I'm in information technology, understanding how light works also will help me to understand how computers work at a quantum scale. And when I say quantum, I'm not confusing that with quantum computing, which is a different subject for a different time, but how they operate at their most minuscule or finite level. And it's really cool to understand those things. Because again, if you understand the computers, you can understand a whole bunch of things, because life all around us is being computerized. Cell phones. So imagine that. With a cell phone, you have the power of all the computers that were used to put man into space in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. All of this power at your disposal. And that's amazing. But we don't get to that without some level of understanding. Because, see, if we were to just take the L and say, well, there are some things that we don't understand, God's ways are higher than ours, his thoughts are not ours, then we take the cop out and we never advance. And that brings me to my next point. Why take a different look at theology or religion? Because when I look at theology is the only branch of intellectual study that really hasn't advanced. It has not advanced in any meaningful way. Basically, the same principles, tenets, observations, and all of that are the same as they were 2,000 years ago. Now, of course, some people will cite people like Richard Rohr, they will cite David Bentley Hart, or they will cite Rachel Held Evans, or they'll cite these different people. They'll cite Bonhoeffer and Kierkegaard, and they'll cite all of these people. But here's the thing about things only advance small segments of the theological spectrum. They don't advance the entire thing. Whereas Henry Ford, he didn't invent the assembly line, but he made it practical and he made it ubiquitous to the point where it was usable and that it could be duplicated. And that revolutionized the automobile industry. The same thing with integrated circuits, with Motorola and the integrated circuit. Without Motorola's advances, people like Intel and AMD, all of these people that produce the chips for people like Apple and IBM and so on and so forth, it just wouldn't be possible. Somehow somebody got hold of something that was able to advance the state of the art. And so we can track back someone, if we say someone who is a physicist today, if or let's say if we took a physicist from the dark ages, like from say 300 AD, and brought them up into 2020, and you don't give them any tools, no technology, nothing else, just books. You just give them the books. If they were to look at what's going on in 2021, people would be, the physicist would absolutely be gobsmacked. His mind would be blown. he would be just astounded at how far things have advanced, how much greater understanding is. If you took a physician from the dark ages and brought him up into 2021, and again, same thing, only given the books, only giving reading material, no technology, no cadavers, nothing, they would be astounded at what is known. But if you took a theologian from 300 AD and put him in 2021 and just give him the books, they'd probably say, hey, well, you guys kept the faith. In other words, you really haven't grown. And so when in the case of theology, you'll see pockets of theology. Every now and then a Rob Bell will appear, and suddenly things will change. A Keith Giles will appear, and suddenly things will change. But they change within the sphere of Keith Giles. They don't move the needle for the entire thing. Whereas in science, when Newton wrote his treatise, science changed. Copernicus changed science. Einstein changed science. Niels Bohr changed science. Freud changed psychology. Jung changed psychology. Moore changed semiconductors. And so on and so on and so on. Musk changed electric cars. And then everything changes. When you put something forth that causes everything in the sphere of that particular discipline to reconsider, that is when the needle moves. So many of you have already heard me say, I've said these things before, and I'm not saying anything new. What I am saying, I'm saying this for the people that are watching this for the first time, and also for people that you may share this with, that they've never encountered this before. But I don't want you to just simply abandon ship. I'm not telling anybody abandon your beliefs, abandon your faith, or anything like that. The one thing that you will hear me say over and over again is that your mileage may vary. In other words, you may experience something completely different than I do, even with the same set of parameters. And that's okay. Because in the quantum world, observation changes action. Observation changes result. Observation is not a passive thing. Observation actually influences. And so it goes with us. As we observe things, we influence them. So if theology is working for you, and if religion is working for you, and if all of these things work for you, if what you believe, what you think, what you feel, if that works for you, and it's producing fruit in your life, if it's producing tangible results, if it's helping your sphere of influence, then great. Keep at it. I'm not telling you to abandon ship or abandon anything that works. But what I am asking is this: that you will simply take time to consider something else. Because this was my thing. I used to be rooted and grounded in dogma. That I believed what I believed about God, about Jesus, about the Bible, and all of that was hard and fast, and it was unchangeable. It was immutable. But somebody, or somebodies, it wasn't any one person, it was many people. Simon Yep, Kyle Butler, Keith Giles, Matthew DiStefano. There are people that have come in my life that have said things that cause me to look at things differently. And that's all I'm asking, is that you will take the time to give consideration to something else. Because see, this is the way that you grow. When your assumptions, where your knowledge, where your beliefs are challenged, and you're forced to consider it. You may not change right away. I mean, listen, there were a whole bunch of things. I'm going to pick on Simon for a second, because Simon presented something to me that was so radical, and I argued and debated with him, and Simon and I had a dust up that lasted about a year. We just, we deleted and blocked. and went our separate ways. But someone else came in and said, "Hey, you and Simon were cool. What happened?" And I said, "Okay, blah blah blah." So this person, sort of reached out and opened a door where Simon and I were able to dialogue. And this time, I listened to Simon with an open mind, and I also took my own advice because, see, Simon had landed on something, preterism, for those of you that don't know what Simon teaches, that Simon could never go back to what he believed after that. At this point, Simon is only going forward. So I couldn't ask him to come back to where I was intellectually, spiritually, because he had moved on. In order for me to dialogue with him, I had to play a game of catch up. I had to listen carefully to what he was saying and open my mind to the possibility that I was wrong. Now, that caused me to grow and to change and advance my theology. And then there were others like Chuck Crisco. Chuck was another guy that was very instrumental. And Dave Carringer is another guy that was very instrumental. And Kyle Butler. These guys all said, "Hey, did you ever think about this, or did you look at it this way?" And when I did, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And it caused me to think about, ponder, consider what they were saying. And when I considered it, see, and this is the thing, that when you leave room for consideration, it means that you give space to something that may be superior to what you know. And that, my friends, is how growth happens. Because if you go into kindergarten thinking that you know everything, you won't learn anything. If you go into your 101 college classes thinking that you know everything, you won't learn anything. You have to go into these spaces with the understanding that you may learn something. But by the same token, a high school senior does not have to go back and relearn what he learned in kindergarten. A college freshman does not have to go back to what she learned in high school. She moves on. So you don't learn backward. You grow and move forward. So everything that I look at, that I learn, that I participate in, for me, it has to be an activity in forward motion. If it isn't moving forward, if someone asks me to consider something that I've already learned, that I already knew, or that even more so that I already taught, I can't go there. I don't have any consideration for anything behind me. If I've moved on from that, now I'm looking to learn something that's further along, because I'm either going toward the singularity of things or I'm going to the edge of things. But I'm not going back to something that I already understood. I'm not trying to get a better understanding of what I understood yesterday. I'm only trying to understand where I am and where I'm going. And that's where you should be too. So I think that that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about tonight. I could go on, but I wanted to start 2021 with quantum spirituality by kind of explaining where I'm coming from. And we're going to talk about some really cool things. We're going to talk about teleportation, and we'll talk about multiverses, and we'll talk about things like the Higgs boson, and we'll talk about paranormal things, supernatural things. We'll talk about telekinesis and all of that. I'm excited because understanding these things is going to cause us to think. And it'll stimulate our brains, stimulate our minds, stimulate our hearts and our spirits, and take us boldly where no one has gone before. Now, and all of this at a level that you can understand. Because again, it doesn't, it's self serving if all I'm doing is presenting something very highbrow at a level that I think I understand because I'm so smart. That's not the objective. The objective is to get some tools in your hands that will allow you to observe, analyze, and apply. So, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to send me an email at comments@derekday.com. You can also hit me up on Instagram, Twitter. My handle is Derek E. Day. And on YouTube, my channel is Derek Day. All of those places. You can also catch me on the Heretic Happy Hour podcast, where I'm joined by Katie Valentine, Keith Giles, and Matthew DiStefano, three of the most extraordinary human beings that I know. And we're going to have new episodes coming up with the Forward podcast, where we're going to be moving humanity forward at the speed of thought. And I am so excited. I got a great lineup of guests coming up this year that some of them are going to absolutely blow your mind. And then also the Love Minus Religion blog, which you can find on Pathos. You can catch me there. And again, I love to hear from you. Tell me what you think. How are you processing spirituality? How is that working out for you? Is it profitable? Is it fruitful? Is it giving you what you need? Or do you think there's more? So, until the next time, I love you. Namaste, and we'll talk soon.